Hey, good to see a good number of you. There will be more people coming a little bit later, perhaps. Um, Anna is our hostess for today. She's put up the prayers. Let's try to begin with strong motivation. Sangye chodang soki chognam la changchu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki Drola penche sange dupasho. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, which in this case also includes contemplating and meditating, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye churang soki chognam la Jangchu Bardu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sognam Ki Trola Penche Sange Drupasho. So for me, when I say that, I think particularly taking refuge in the Dharma, because that's what, for us, until we, yeah, that is our actual refuge, our Dharma realizations, the recollection of impermanence and emptiness and bodhicitta and so forth, sort of like the mind training. And then offering a short mandala. Sashipuki Chukshing Meto Tram Rab Lingji Ni Degen Padi Sangye Shingdu Mikte Ulwargi Trokunam Dakshingla Chupasho. So I'll say it in English also. So this verse, usually when the mandala is offered at the beginning of teachings by His Holiness, a long mandala is offered, and almost invariably this short mandala is offered immediately afterward. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy such a pure realm. And then, as banking, so to speak, on the having made an offering of the mandala, making a request to turn the wheel of Dharma, O holy and perfect pure Lamas, from the clouds of compassion that form the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please send down, please release a rain of vast and profound dharmas, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay, good to see you. Hi, Mikhail. Hi, Rachel's here. Karen is here. I thought there's also, you see right above you in the gallery, I don't know if you have a gallery view on Dr. Karen. I thought you had suddenly, I thought Karen Mastrioni had suddenly had a doctor's degree.
I do, but I don't have it on there, so I don't know
Oh,
why
okay.
it popped up.
Yeah. Okay. Good to see you all. So let's begin with a little meditation to try to coalesce the motivation that we enunciated in words. So sit comfortably, relax your body, relax your mind. Try to recognize your respiration. And I say, try. It's easy to do. And once you've recognized it, hold it with the mental factor mindfulness, augmented by the mental factor of introspection, or so kind of like mental spy, watching whether you are your mind is wandering onto other things. If you're confronted with little aches and pains or tension in the body, at the beginning, you can imagine breathing out the winds that support those pains or discomforts in the form of black smoke, and the exhalations, and breathing in white light, inspiration from the Buddhas, alternately, and then go back to just watching the breathing. If your mind's a little bit relaxed, as you inhale once, bring your attention down to your heart chakra as though the breath goes down there. Leave off observing the breathing, and just observe your mental consciousness. You can go through them, not the eye consciousness. Check that off. I don't want to pay attention to that. Not the ear consciousness, not the nose, tongue, or body consciousnesses. We can recognize the mental consciousness at first only by recognizing its contents, because the mind itself, mental consciousness, is very subtle, not something that presents itself immediately like a manifest object. The various thoughts you have, the memories, observations about the present, plans about the future, mental images, emotions, if you want to use the general term, different kinds of positive and negative mental factors. All of those are like clouds, contents in our mind, like clouds in an otherwise clear sky. Like standing behind a glass wall enclosing an aquarium at the big, huge aquariums in various cities. And if someone were to say to you, "Oh, look at the water," you would say, well, "How, because the water is transparent, well, what's the water?" It's that which within the sharks are swimming. I have to cancel this telephone call here. The mental consciousness is that within which the various mental events are arising, emerging out of the mind itself, and sometimes absorbing back into it, unimpeded by any obstructing quality of the mind. That lack of hindrance or obstruction to the emergence or reabsorption of mental events is called the conventional Buddha nature, the developmental Buddha nature, the conventional clear light nature of the mind. What you have at first is just a mental image of that. But see if you can hold that for some time. And feeling joy in the fact that we can transform ourselves. There is no one who is incapable, because all living beings have this conventional clear light nature of the mind. Even animals, even evil beings, hell beings, all have that nature. But right now we have the ability to analyze and perhaps get an intuition about it due to this auspicious moment of rebirth that we have as a human, with the 8 freedoms and 10 endowments, a life of leisure and endowment. We're born in a time when the Buddha has descended, turned the wheel of Dharma, and those teachings still exist in recognizable form, realizable form. There's communities of practitioners who are actualizing it and teaching it. And we have faith, at least to some degree, enough to engage in the practice. Once we recognized the fact that we have this life of leisure and endowment, that this is an auspicious moment that's highly meaningful, temporary, disintegrating with every moment, our life, as though we're falling to our eventual death. We just don't know when it's going to hit the bottom. Buddha Shakyamuni himself said that this had incredible potential, great meaning, because we can use this life rather than in the usual pursuits of the 8 worldly dharmas, or more generally just with concern, general concern for ordinary beings, with the appearances of this life alone. We can aim to achieve nirvana or enlightenment, or at least to develop the realizations that lead to it, the 3 fundamental aspects of the path: renunciation, bodhicitta, and the right view of emptiness. And the Buddha advised those disciples of higher faculties, sharper faculties, especially that of wisdom and faith, not to be content with his Hinayana teachings alone, with his lesser vehicle teachings alone, that we should strive to enter his great vehicle, open the door, get in, get behind the driver's wheel, and head off toward enlightenment rather than nirvana in the great vehicle that has space for all other living beings. We can transport them to that great goal. In order to do so, we need to know the method to do that, which rests upon the practice of the Bodhisattva's perfections, the 6 perfections, which are encompassed in the collection of merit and collection of wisdom. Collection of merit means the creation of virtuous karma, essentially. That acts as a cooperative cause for the production of the physical bodies of the Buddha, our eventual Buddhahood, the Rupakaya and Sambhogakaya, and the collection of wisdom, realizations of emptiness that act as a cooperative cause of developing the wisdom Dharmakaya, the omniscient mind of a Buddha. As we are lacking in knowledge about those methods, maybe we have some intuitive, from birth, sense to be good, to act well, and to try to be wise. But in order to hone that, we need to read the Buddha's explanations from his Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, as expounded on by Nagarjuna in his Fundamental Wisdom, the famous textbook on emptiness, and especially Chandrakirti's commentary on that, the Madhyamakavatara, and our class studying particular particularly Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on Chandrakirti, Gompa Rapso, illumination of the intent or an intention, sort of clarifying what Nagarjuna's intent was in writing his fundamental wisdom. Why would I want to attain enlightenment? Because I will be in a state of perfection of my own goal, all suffering eliminated, like, say, for instance, Hinayana Arhats, but not only that, also the obstructions to omniscience, and totally blissful, everything experienced in a unification of bliss and void. All predicated upon the achievement of that for the benefit of sentient beings, so that we as a Buddha can effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error lead all sentient beings out of suffering successively through whatever state they're in now, the hell realms, the animal realm, the Praetor realm, the God realms, humans, whatever number of lives it may take, we can lead them skillfully into that very same state of enlightenment. Because we're all equal with them in wanting to be free of suffering, wanting to have happiness. Sentient beings have been depthlessly kind to us also in numberless lives. Even our arch rivals or political foes, or, those are just the appearances of this life. They have all been our mother numberless times and depthlessly kind during those lives. So think, I'm going to participate today in the class in order to achieve enlightenment for their sake, for the sake of mother sentient beings, friends, enemies, and strangers, those that we may not even recognize as having consciousness, spirit realm, other realms that we don't perceive directly. I'm going to listen, contemplate, and meditate on the material in order to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. That's my motivation for attending the class, to achieve that goal. I must become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. And then relax your mind, bring back to the present. Hi, Suvash. Hi, Don. A couple people have come in. Rachel's here. David's here. Good to see you. Yeah. So how are we doing? Anyone have any Dharma questions? Any Dharma itches that you need some Dharma calamine lotion before we begin? Dr. Karen in Colorado is visiting our class today. Do you have anything, Dr. Karen? No? Okay. Any question? No one? Okay.
I could use the page numbers.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll give you that first of all. Yeah. So in Thupten Jinpa's text, it's page 331, and in the FPMT translation by Venerable Joan Nysel, page 187. Okay. So, yeah. Later during our break time, I'll ask Richard if he'll post the photos again, a photo or two of his trip to the Far East. He's been gone for several weeks and had a chance to visit Angkor Wat. So during our break time, just before that, I'll ask him to post those pictures, and we can talk about them during the break. So before we begin, I wanted to read a couple of stanzas from the offering of the Gana Chakra, the Sog offering. You've heard of that, right? From Highest Yoga Tantra. Do you know what Sog is, Suvash? Yeah. Does anyone doesn't know what that term means? Okay. So in the Vajrayogini text, there are some verses after one's offered to the guru, and say to Vajrayogini and to other yidams and to the triple gem, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, to the Dakas, Dakinis, and protectors, and to all sentient beings. Then you offer to the guru directly. And there's a verse that goes like this. Dini chunam sangpo tu, dualani tesom me, dramze dulpa kidang pak, rangshin chitu roldu so. I'm not sure if any of you recite those verses. Does that resonate with anyone? Does anyone know those Tibetan words? Paul, anyone who practices Tantra? So basically what it's saying is, Dini chunam sangpo tu. So here, view all phenomena, or view phenomena as excellent, sangpo tu. Dualani tesome. May there be no doubt among the assembly. So this is what when you're offering to the guru. So the sog that you're offering, you want to imagine as being arisen out of the realization of bliss and void, and to have no doubt about that. Then it goes on, Dramse Dua Kidang Pak. So Brahmse means, the Tibetan way of saying Brahmins, or they say Tamse, Brahmins, Dua. What does Tupa mean? Do you know, Paul? Dolpa, sorry.
What's the spelling, Venerable George?
Dao Naro Du La Dul. So that means, generally, that means the lowest caste. So the Brahmins, or untouchables, or whatever you want to call them. Hidang Pak, dogs and pigs. Rangshin Chitu, Roldu soul. Try to see them as of the same nature. So not to discriminate among the participants of the Sog, to see them all in that nature of bliss and void is excellent. And then a verse that brings tears to my eyes often, Deshek Chula Rangtin Rintang Me, Dochak Laso Dima Del, Sungdang Zimpa Nampang Pa, Dejin Nila Guchak Sel. So this is Deshik Chula Rintang Me. So the Dharma of the Sugata, the Buddha's Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, is Rintang Me. Rintang Me means so Rintang kind of means value. So it doesn't mean valueless. It means beyond value. In incomparable. There's no way that you could put a price on the value of the Dharma. Deishing chula rintang me, dojak lasso dima del. So separated from the stains of attachment and so forth. Zungdang zimpa nangpangpa, having abandoned the apprehension of apprehended object and the apprehender. Here doesn't mean just like in the Chittamatra sense, but sort of like a sense of single-pointed concentration on this. Dejin Nila Guchaksel, I prostrate to Dejin Ni, so to the absolute nature of things. And then one offers that to the Guru. So I thought I would mention that because if you are, sometimes when I've mentioned before, Lama Tsongkhapa said that his understanding of Tantra was sometimes augmented by his understanding of the sutra system, say the Madhyamaka, the Prasangika understanding of emptiness, and sometimes the understanding of Tantra can augment our understanding of sutra. So this is one example of that. Anna, what do you think?
Honorable, I was too shy to ask, but what is Tsong?
Oh, so Sog is a Tibetan word that's a translation of the Sanskrit word gana, which means assembly, group. Generally, we say sangha for the assembly of practitioners, ordained and lay practitioners, right? The sangha. So another word for sangha is gana, but especially in Tantra, when you talk about the tantric practitioners, you talk about the gana. And if you have an assembly of both male and female practitioners, as you might offer during Sog offering, that's a korlo. So we say in Tibetan, we say Sogi korlo or Gana chakra. That is the group of people that are making offering to the Guru of these sacred substances, visualized, as I said earlier in those verses, with an understanding of emptiness imbued with bliss. So that kind of offering is done usually on the 10th and the 25th of the Tibetan calendar, if you have a highest yoga tantra empowerment, especially if you have empowerment of the mother tantra, such as Haruka or Vajrayogini. But in the Gelugpa tradition, usually whatever, Kala Chakra, whatever, one offers Sog on the 10th and the 25th. So what that means is you will accumulate the sacred substances, you'll bless them. You might do the Guru Puja that we will do on Lama Tsongkhapa Day. I think the Sunday after tomorrow, a week from tomorrow, we'll do together for Shantideva Center, the Guru Puja in honor of Lama Tsongkhapa. That's Lama Tsongkhapa Day. And we'll offer the Guru Puja and offer Sog at that time. Okay. Does that help a little, Anna? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So let's get into it. Let's chew some dry bones here. So if you don't have either of the written texts, but you just have the what do they call it, the ebook version that like I have on my computer in front of me, you'll look for, I think Diana just has that, the opponent might entertain the following thought. If you search for that, you'll find where we are. So we've just finished verses 669, 670, and 671, where they were the beginning of this section that says how such a refutation is not inconsistent with a meditation on foulness. Not inconsistent. There's a double negative, right? So that means it's conducive. It accords with the meditation on repulsiveness or foulness. We mentioned before that's the kind of meditation that one does in order to sort of suppress attachment and so forth. It might be the major meditation one does if the major affliction you have is attachment and lust for body, or say vanity for that matter, attachment to your own body or attachment to other bodies. In developing tranquil abiding, you can use various objects. So this is one of the objects that's used for overcoming the major afflictions that prevent you from developing tranquil abiding. So right after that, in Thupten Jinpa's text, it says, the opponent, it means the Chittamatra, might entertain the following thought. If no intrinsically real cognition, so that means no inherently existing cognition, perceiving form, sound, smells, tastes, and tactile objects, says form, sound, and so forth. So if none of these consciousnesses are truly existent, if they don't exist that way, if no intrinsically real cognition, perceiving sound, form, sound, and so forth exists in the absence of external reality, that means predicated upon the Chittamatra view that there's no external reality, that the appearance of externality, the fact that things seem to be a different nature from the mind, is an illusion, then how is it possible for the yogis, who on the basis of their guru's instruction see the ground around themselves as filled with skeletons? Remember, so this is the Chittamatra interrupting, right? So we've already refuted that the earlier, from the Prasangika point of view, using certain logics, we refuted that the mind is truly existent, as the Chittamatra believes. We've already refuted with various logics the Chittamatra position that there's no external reality. Prasangika accepts that there is, and most of the other schools also accept that there is an external reality that's a different entity from the mind. But Chittamatra is now going at it again. They're saying, so for the yogis, on the basis of their guru's instruction, that means the guru may give them the instruction to meditate on, emanating from their brow a skeleton or a bone that emanates in front of them, and then that each of that bone emanates two more bones, and each of those emanate more, and sort of like Samantabhadra offerings, right? Till the whole space is filled with bones and skeletons. And you would imagine any sentient being then is, even though your eye consciousness is seeing, their ordinary form of flesh and blood and so forth, your mental consciousness would be superimposing that visualization of skeletons, that's their inner nature, that death is coming, and that is not as attractive as the ordinary mind thinks. That the mind that looks at beings and develops some attachment and lust for them and so forth. So how is it possible for yogis who, on the basis of their guru's instruction, see the ground around themselves as filled with skeletons? Therefore, although such skeletons do not exist, which is a point that the Prasangika would say, they do exist in some way, but anyway, they don't exist as skeletons. Even though the skeletons do not exist, intrinsically real cognition perceiving them must have existence. This is the Chittamatra persisting Yeah, Mikhail.
Yes, so are they using this example to prove that there is no external object again?
They're trying to this is an argument. It's not clear whether Chandrakirti was referring to some particular segment of Chittamatra that raised this argument. Sounds like that's and not just something he invented by himself, but they're saying that they're trying to use this as an example to say that their view is correct, that there has to be an inherently existent consciousness perceiving the lack of duality and so forth. Okay, so let's read on with Thupten Jinpa's translation. Even in this case of a yogi who meditates on foulness of his body or repulsiveness of his body in accordance with his master's instructions and sees the ground around himself as filled with skeletons, here too, all three factors, the object, the sense faculty, and the cognition, the consciousness, must be seen as devoid of intrinsic production, intrinsic arising, inherent arising. Remember when we talked about the Nagarjuna's first stanza, that there's no production from self, from other, from both, or neither, at any time, at any place, in any way. So this is talking about the production of conventional things. They must be devoid of intrinsic arising. So this is the Prasangika answering that objection. This meditative concentration of the yogis is thus described in the sutras as attending to a fictitious object, something that is unreal. Right? Fictitious object. So there's something which is, from Prasangika point of view, that which is true or real is that which, the appearance of which accords with its actual mode of being. So these, when we say this meditative concentration is thus described in the sutras as attending to a fictitious object, that means an object that doesn't accord with it appears one way, but it doesn't exist in the way that it's appearing, something that is unreal. Then the commentary continues. However, if the cognition that perceives skeletons were to exist intrinsically, if there was an inherently existent consciousness that was perceiving the skeletons, what it perceives also, would similarly possess intrinsic existence. If the consciousness is inherently existent, the objects would have to be inherently existent, saying. In that case, such cognition, such consciousness would be engaging with what is actually true in reality. It wouldn't be fictitious. This is something you, the opponent, would be compelled to admit. You, Chittamatra, would be compelled to admit. If such were the case, this consequence would follow. Just as when one person watches a performance such as a play, a drama, soap opera, go to the opera or whatever, just as when one person watches a performance such as a play, and sense perception bearing the aspect of the performance arises from directing their eyes to that object, that scene, those people or scenery in the play, the same objects of sense perception would be perceived by other spectators as well. Well, isn't that true? What do you think, Karen?
Yes, but they may have a different opinion of those objects or a different story around them. But if they're all watching the stage, they would see something similar, I would say.
Yeah, they would have their own particular, according to their karma, their own particular appearance of them. In the same manner, for you, Chittamatra, just as the yogi sees objects of foulness meditation, this meditation on repulsiveness, the skeletons, when other persons who are not yogis direct their mind to the object, the perceived skeletons, with the wish to see such objects, they too should cognize the skeletons. This would be just like the perception of blue and so on they experience. What do you think, Sean?
I was just wondering how or why, if you say, that if the mind is inherently existing, why does that imply that the other phenomenon have to inherently exist?
Well, this is the Chittamatra position, right? They say that dependent phenomena are inherent, are truly existent also.
Okay.
Remember? Okay. So then it says, when we consult the commentary, that would mean Chandrakirti's auto commentary, it appears that we may need a different translation of the verse, something like the following. So the verse in question is this first one, 669. The verse, the yogis who on the basis of their guru's instruction see the ground is filled with skeletons, here too, all three factors must be seen as devoid of arising. This is thus described as meditation attending to a fictitious object. So Lama Tsong Khapa when he's referring now to the Madhyamakavatara Bhashyam, Chandrakirti is suggesting that there's another way that you could, or Lama Tsong Khapa, let's say, when we consult the commentary, it appears that we may need a different translation of the verse. So this is not something that's in the commentary, but depending on Chandrakirti's commentary to that verse, Lama Tsong Khapa is suggesting this would be a better way to translate it. This is not from, remember when sometimes we have alternate translations from other translator other than Patsap, but here this is just Lama Tsong Khapa suggesting this might be a better way to translate it, depending on what Chandrakirti had said in his commentary. Just like objects you attend to with your senses, likewise with respect to meditation on foulness, perception of skeletons will arise and won't be false for those others who direct their mind to it as well. Making sense, Don? Is that making sense to you?
I'd like explanation.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, so, yeah, Lama Tsong Khapa is going to explain.
Excuse me, Venerable.
Yes.
Would this be, could this better be stated or equally be stated? Perceptions of skeletons would arise, because he's speaking conditionally. Like, if this were true, the perception of skeletons would arise and wouldn't be false.
Yeah, I think the conditional case would be more appropriate there, right?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Perception of skeletons would arise and they wouldn't be false for those who direct their mind to that as well. So if these objects were inherently existent, other people who turn their eyes there to where the yogi is meditating about visualizing skeletons. That is, the visualization of skeleton is only arising for the yogi themselves or yogini. Other people who turn their mind there would also see the skeletons if they were inherently existent.
Venerable George?
Yeah.
So I think that would be an alternate translation of the second verse, correct? Verse 70.
Oh, did I give the wrong one? Let's see, 70. If these objects of foulness meditation are for you just like your objects of sense perception, then when other persons direct their mind to it, they too should cognize it. This means they are not fictitious. Yeah, I think that's talking about 70. I said 69 incorrectly. Thank you, Paul. So continuing in Jimba's translation of Lama Tsong Khapa, furthermore, this means this foulness meditation is not attending to fictitious objects. The point of drawing equivalence between yogis and non-yogis is this. If cognition existed intrinsically, if consciousness was inherently existent, remember, one could then negate its dependence on the meditation that accords with the instruction on cultivating the perception of skeletons. Oh, that's a little bit complicated sentence, no? What does Venerable Jones say at that point? She translated verses on 187. Let me see if I get the right page there. Okay. Here, in accordance with the auto commentary, the translation of the above verse from the supplement, verse 670, as Paul pointed out, could also have been, for you, just like those directed to the objects of sense awareness. Yeah, so as Karen had pointed out, that the other people who are looking at the play see the same thing with their sense consciousnesses that you see. So just like that, so too it is for those possessing a mind of repulsiveness. Likewise, through also being produced in others who direct their awareness to that place, that too would not be false. Okay, that's verse 670. So the commentary that we just read is translated by Venerable Jonas. If this were not the case, am I getting this right? Oh, no, right after that. The meditative, this is now on the beginning of page 188 in Venerable Jones' translation, where we just read, furthermore, this means that foulness meditation is not attending to fictitious objects. So Venerable Jones translated, the meditative stabilization would also not be mental attention to the false. That is, to a wrong object. Would not be. Also, this assertion that yogis and non-yogis would equally see skeletons is in terms of the main point that if consciousness were to exist inherently, then dependence on meditating on the instructions regarding skeletons could be negated. If consciousness were to exist inherently, then dependence on meditating on the instruction regarding skeletons could be negated. It may make a little more sense than the Thupten Jinpa's translation there. Mikhail, what do you think? Anything?
So if I understand correctly, if consciousness is true, then the object is also true. And if that's the case, then meditating on skeleton is wrong. The skeletons are wrong. mean, no. Am I getting that wrong?
So yeah, so what is it saying here? The restatement of verse 670, as Paul pointed out, and as Venerable Joan mentioned, that's Lama Tsongkhapa's attempt here. For you, just like those who direct it to the objects of sense awareness, so too is it for those possessing a mind of repulsiveness. So just in the same way that people who are looking at the play see the same thing, so too for those possessing the mind of repulsiveness, the yoginis who are meditating on repulsiveness, seeing skeletons, likewise also being produced in others who direct their awareness to that place, that too would not be false. So
that is not the case. Not only yogis see on the instructions of Lama see skeletons.
right.
So that means that the instructions are wrong because not everybody sees them, or?
No, the instruction is for you yourself, right? How to meditate. Remember when we talk about the instructions, when we talk about tranquil abiding, one of the first fault of what's the first fault of developing,
forgetting the instruction,
right? So that instruction, that mengak, it means the guru's instruction how to meditate. Either meditate on let's say the body of Buddha that's this way or that way, or meditate on loving kindness, or meditate on repulsiveness, depending on the situation of the.
Yeah, I see that, but this instruction would be wrong only in the case of a true consciousness.
It's not that the instructions would be wrong.
I mean, yeah, no, not instructions.
Perceptions.
The seeing of skeletons.
Yes. So in actuality, other people who turn their attention to the place where the yogi or yogini is visualizing the skeletons, they don't see skeletons, right? But if they were to be inherently existent, the way that the Chittamatra would like to have, then they should see that as well. They wouldn't be false. Is that better?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So let's see. So Lama Tsongkhapa continues in Thupten Jinpa's translation. We should also know how to respond in a similar manner to the citation of other examples such as the illusion, an illusion, the reflection of a face in a mirror, and so on, recognizing how the same is true of someone with an eye disease. In the case of a preta's perception of a river as a stream of pus, too, also, we should understand this phenomena similarly. Okay, we're going to talk about the perception of the preta's perception of pus in a moment. So, Venerable Joan inserts verse 671a and b before this, where Jinpa said we should also know how to respond in a similar manner. Venerable Joan says, similarly, also understand the way of responding to the examples set forth, such as those illusions, reflections, and so forth, as being like those possessing a sense power with an eye defect. This is quoting 671a and b. Also understand that the production of a mind of pus and blood in a hungry ghost on the bank of a flowing river to be above. So what is that saying? Paul, what do you think?
I think it's just saying that there are other examples of I don't want to say fictitious objects, but of perceptions that do not accord with reality. So just like a yogi meditating on skeletons would be comparable to a hungry ghost seeing pus and blood instead of a river and so on. I think that's what it's saying, right?
Well, let's see. So, what kind of examples? So, illusions, that's easy. If the illusion that the magician has created was inherently existent, then anyone who turned their eye there, whether they had been affected by the spell of the magician or not, should see the illusion. Whereas the famous example that we talked about before about illusions, the various kinds of, the people whose minds are affected by the spell of the magician, they do see the horse or the elephant or the beautiful man or woman that the magician has created. But other people who come in late, they weren't affected by the spell. They don't see anything when they turn their eyes there, right? So that would be the illusion. But what about a reflection? What is that talking about? Nadine has an idea.
Could it be that if what the Chitta Mantras say that the mind and its objects are inherently existent, then there is absolutely no way to explain how different sentient beings perceive one thing in different ways.
Right. That's another way of saying it. Yeah, that's good. But what about the example? So the example of illusion seems clear, right? What about the example of a reflection? Both texts translate that the same way. Jimpa said, such as an illusion, the reflection of a face in a mirror. Venerable Jones says what? Illusions, reflections, and so forth. I didn't put the Tibetan down here. Paul, do you have the Tibetan in front of you, or Mikhail? Does it say reflection of a face in a mirror, or does it just say reflections?
Just says reflections. Doesn't say of a face in the mirror.
Okay,
Just says, Gyuma Tong Suknyen Sok. So illusion and reflection, etc.
Right. So Tumten Jimpa is adding the reflection of a face in a mirror. So how does the example of a reflection, wouldn't other people who looked in the mirrors see the same reflection? Maybe what Tumten Jimpa is saying is that the reflection of your face, so you're standing in front of the mirror and you see your reflection, but someone off to the side who's looking at the mirror, they wouldn't necessarily see the reflection of your face in the mirror. That's what I'm taking that to mean. Paul, do you have a thought?
I'm just wondering if maybe it means that, if it intrinsically exists, then it has to exist in the manner in which it appears, and a reflection is sort of the opposite of how things appear. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah.
I thought they were trying to distinguish between, like you said, if you look in a mirror, other people can see that thing. So it goes back to the form argument we were talking about earlier, where there's those two kinds of forms. One can be perceived by all people, and one is only perceived by within the mind of the person experiencing it. So I think he's distinguishing between those two types of things.
It seems to me to be what's the case here. But yeah, Mickey,
usually the reflections are said to be false, just like illusions, mirage, and so on, just because when you believe that there is a real face,
right.
that's why they are said wrong and compared to the other examples.
So is it that this paragraph is about how others see it, or is it just how the phenomena appears incorrectly?
Yeah, this question. So let's see again. So this is after verse 671 in Venerable Jones' translation, 671 A and B. Like those possessing a sense power with an eye defect. Remember, so what does that mean? Remember, if someone has a sense of floaters and they are perceiving falling hair falling into their porridge or into the food that you serve them, and they argue to the waiter who doesn't have a sense of floaters. They're arguing there are hairs, there are worms in wriggling around in my porridge here. Take this away. And the maitre d' says, no, it's not. This is. I think this is more aligned with what you, Rachel, were saying. So too is the mind of pus in a hungry ghost on the bank of a flowing river. So this is saying similarly, also to understand the way of responding to the examples set forth, such as those of illusions, reflections, and so forth, as being like those possessing a sense power with an eye defect. Also understand that the production of a mind of pus and blood in a hungry ghost on the bank of a flowing river, where is it? To be above. Okay. So yeah, go on.
Venerable George, going back to the reflection of the face in the mirror, if I see my face in the mirror, I think I'm there. Everybody else sees me.
Right, that's what I was taking, but I think maybe the better explanation is that when you talk about the reflection of a face in a mirror to a young child or to a parakeet, that is believed to be the actual face, an actual face, not your actual face, but an actual face. So that's a wrong object, as Paul and someone else pointed out. Let's go a little bit
Venerable,
further.
there's also the dislocation in space. If I am not somebody who thinks there's another person who looks just like me in the mirror, I'm still looking at an image that makes me think something is there at that specific place in space, and it isn't. You know, objects in the mirror may be closer than they appear.
Right.
But isn't the argument that the face in the mirror is like, because the Chittamatra are trying to argue that the skeletons are false, aren't they? They were trying to say that those aren't inherently existing. Am I correct or am I wrong about that? Because they're trying to say, or what the Prasangika is trying to point out is in the face in the mirror, that object is false. We all agree that that's not a real face, but we all see it. Whereas with the skeletons, they're trying to say it's false, but we don't all see it. So they're trying to, this Prasangika are trying to show that these two things are similar, but they're not. You're arguing them in two different approaches.
Okay. Let's go a little bit further. We'll come back to this again because this is a crucial point that's a little bit difficult to understand at first. So in Thupten Jinpa's, we just read this. We should also know how to respond in a similar manner to the citation of other examples, such as an illusion, a reflection, and you can take of a face in a mirror in parentheses there because it just says a reflection, and so on, recognizing how the same is true of someone with an eye disease. So there, when it's talking about this, same is true with someone with an eye disease. So when we're talking about floaters, as I said, that person would be perceiving something when they look at the porridge, but the maitre d' or the waiter would be looking there and they wouldn't see that. Okay, so it's unclear about the example of the reflection of a face in a mirror, unclear to me. In the case of a praetor's perception of a river as a stream of pus too, we should also understand this phenomena similarly. So when a praetor looks at a flowing river, they see pus and blood, but other people who look at the river don't see pus and blood, right? People who are don't have that karma. Okay, let's continue on. Now, with respect to the 5 mental object forms we've talked about before, remember the forms that are exclusive to the mental consciousness. Remember, like non-revelatory forms and so forth. Now, with respect to the 5 mental object forms, these are not metaphysical constructs of the Buddha, of the Buddhist essentialists. Okay, who are the Buddhist essentialists? Well, Thupten Jinpa's note there, 597, says, see note 574 above. What was 574? So Khapa is here thinking of the 5 types of mental object forms mentioned in the Sangha's Compendium of Abhidharma, forms emerging from a process of deconstruction, which we had a different translation of, forms of open space, forms of vows derived through a rite, forms that are imagined or imputed, and forms arising from meditative expertise. That's what we're talking about here.
Which we call the phenomena spheres, right?
Right, right. So now with respect to the 5 mental object forms, these are not metaphysical constructs of the Buddhist essentialists. They are mentioned in the sutras, and Chandrakirti accepts them within his own system as well. So this vivid appearance of skeletons being perceived, even though none exists, must be considered a kind of form like a mirror image. And remember, we did mention this before when we talked about the Prasangika view of a mirror image. A mirror image is considered to be an actual visible form. This vivid appearance of skeletons being perceived, even though none exists, must be considered a kind of form like a mirror image. Since it is perceived only by mental cognition, however, that is the skeletons, face in a mirror is perceived by your eye, right? Since it is perceived, skeletons are perceived only by mental cognition, however, they cannot be a visible form like the reflection of a face in a mirror. It also cannot be any of the remaining 9 material forms. It can't be sounds, smells, tastes, and textures, tactile objects, plus the 5 sense organs. Hence, the occurrence of its name, imputed mental object form. Yeah. I think we'll dive into this on Monday in more detail. The appearance of floating hairs being perceived by visual cognition, however, is a visible form, just like the reflection of a face in a mirror. As for a hungry ghost's perception of a flowing stream, flowing river, as pus and blood, it too must be accepted to be a visible form, since it is perceived by their eye consciousnesses, right? Anna, you're just going to remind us to getting close to time to take a break. So let's read this first. Yeah. So here it says, summary of the great vehicle also says. So summary of the great vehicle, what is that? Do you remember? Anyone remember what that text is? Mikhail, do you remember?
Sutra Samuccaya? No.
Mahayana Samgraha, I think. So
Oh,
that
Mahayana
I think
Samgraha. Okay.
so. This was translated. I think you or someone else provided the translation by Buchholz. So this was a text composed by a sangha. It's not one of his. It's not one of the 5 texts that were presented from Maitreya, but it's another text by a sangha. For hungry ghosts, animals, humans, and gods, commensurate with their own stations, a single thing engenders different cognitions. So we assert the non-existence of external reality. So this is, from what point of view is that? Is that Prasangika or is that Chittamatra?
Chittamatra.
Yeah, it's Chittamatra, right? Is that right, Nadine? Do you agree? Yeah. So FPNT translates it, Venerable Joan translated, because for each of the classes of hungry ghosts, animals, human beings, and gods, one thing is different for their minds. Objects, because of that, objects are asserted to be are asserted to not be established, or maybe not to be. Is that right? Diana, where do you have to put the not? Objects are asserted to not be established or not to be established. I think you're not supposed to split infinitive.
I think it's to be or not to be.
To be or not.
I don't think it makes a difference.
I thought you weren't supposed to split infinitives like.
You can't,
That's
not.
a leftover rule from Latin, but I don't think that the meaning is different in this case.
Right. Okay. So Jose Cabezon, in his text Dose of Emptiness, has that same verse. And in that he translates, because a single thing is different for different minds, depending upon what family of beings they belong to. A single thing is different for different minds, depending on what family of beings they belong to, whether preta, animal, human, or God. We accept objects to be non-existent. Oh. So in this context, yeah, there we go. So Doris has kindly provided in the chat there this excerpt from Jose Cabezon's translation of A Dose of Emptiness. That's a famous text by whom? Do you know, Mikhail?
Gedobje.
Gedobje, one of Lama Tsongkhapa's true disciples, a more wrathful one, right? Gedobje was a great debater. And so this is a famous text, Tong Tun. Tun usually can mean session. So tong can mean empty or 1,000. The same word, tong, can mean 1,000 or empty. So you can say a dose of emptiness or 1,000 doses or 1,000 sessions, different ways of translating. So he translates a dose of emptiness. So there you have, and you can take a look at this in addition to during the break time to looking at the photos that Richard may download for us about his trip to Angkor Wat. sense perceptions, this is starting on page 334 of Jose's translation. Sense perception across world spheres, the case of water. Okay, so that note 1044 is referring back to Majjhimavatara, just where we are. So he says, opponent, if there are external objects in the world is not the nature of mind. So this is, the opponent means Chittamatra. So if according to you, Prasankika, there are external objects, that they're not the nature of the mind, and the world is not the nature of the mind, how should one consider a river of water that appears to a preta as pus and blood? Is it the pus and blood that appears to be or not? This is a question that we're dealing with here. Also, are the pus and blood to be accepted as external objects? Or he puts it in the singular. Is the pus and blood to be accepted as an external object, or is it not? Reply. In this regard, the Mahayana Samgraha says, because a single thing is different for different minds, depending on what family of beings they belong to, whether preta, animal, human, or God, we accept the object to be non-existent. So this is a Chittamatra point of view. So then, and I'm just going to read one more thing here, and then we'll leave we'll take a break. He says, in the explanation, Shajar, of that work by the venerable spiritual friend Nisvabhava. So where does that occur? Does that occur in our own text? That occurs in the next, in Thupten Jinpa's translation. The summary of the Great Vehicle does not clarify what that single thing is and how it is perceived differently. Thupten Jinpa translates Asvabhava. However, gives the following explanation in his interspersed explanation of the summary of Great Vehicle. So this is the same quote as in Jose's translation. There he translates what Jinpa says asvabhava as nisvabhava. I'm going to ask Paul, because our other Sanskritist, John Campbell, is not here. How do you, is that the same name? Nisvabhava and asvabhava?
Yeah, well, because as a prefix or ni both mean negative, right? So it's just assuming, usually, it's probably a reconstruction of the Sanskrit name from the Tibetan. I think the Tibetan name is Ngoongi Mepa, which you could either be Niswabhava or Aswabhava.
Right. So when you have the syllable a, as we've translated, we mentioned many times before a word, that's usually a negative particle, right? That means the negative of something like, what's an example, Paul?
So I was only thinking of un-atman, which is is also negative, but abhava, yeah, something like ahimsa, non-killing.
Right, ahimsa. So himsa means violent behavior or violence, and ahimsa means non-violence. So that's a negative particle. Whereas there's another kind of negative there that you can use, ni. So ni coming before an S, I'm assuming then that by the rules of grammar by Sunday, you have to add that H with a dot underneath. What's that called, Paul?
Visarga.
Visarga. You have to add a visarga there. So they're talking about the same work in Jose's translation. He just calls it the explanation of that work, Shajar, whereas Jinpa translates it as what, an interspersed explanation. I guess that's the jar. So we will leave that with you right now to think about. We're going to take a little break again. Okay, here we are again. Good to see you back. Some people had to leave. Yeah. So this PDF excerpt from Jose Cabezon's text, let's read this a little bit, and then we'll go back into Thupten Jinpa's translation of Lama Tsongkhapa, because this is meant to be a sort of commentary of Lama Tsongkhapa's. Not in regard to that, he's going into details about it. So he says he's quoting the Mahasamgraha. We just said, because a single thing is different for different minds, depending upon what family of beings they belong to, whether preta, animal, human, or God, we accept the object to be non-existent. So that means the Chittamatra accepts it to be not an external object, not existing as an external object. And so Asvabhava or Nisvabhava, in his commentary to the Mahayana Samgraha, so he's another scholar that's commenting on Asanga's text, says, by virtue of the ripening of his or her own karma, I often try to do that also, say his or her. Jose is very careful about that gender inclusion also. The Tibetan or the Sanskrit just says one. By virtue of the ripening of his or her own karma, a preta sees deposits of water, such as rivers, to be filled with pus and so forth. An animal, for example, a fish, conceives of it as its own abode. Humans conceive of it as sweet, pure, fresh water and think, I will wash in it, or I will drink it, I will enter it. The gods who are equipoised in the element of infinite space. So what does that mean? The formless gods of infinite space see it as space, for they have no recognition of form. So then it goes on. There's one opponent. It is for this reason that all phenomena are whatever one's own mind makes them out to be. It is impossible to say in a definitive way, it is this or it is that. It is not this. So that wouldn't accord with the Buddhist understanding. Another opponent says, because it is true for a being as it appears within the purview of that own being's own mind, a single entity that has the property of wetness and fluidity is true pus within a preta's purview and is true water for a human. So what he's saying here, wetness and fluidity, what is that talking about? Does anyone remember?
It's the definition of water, right?
Right. So that which is, let me see where I put it here. Oh, here we go.
Wet and moistening. Something.
Yeah, I had it here somewhere, the actual Tibetan.
Lenshing Sherwa.
Lengxing Sherwa, yeah. For some reason, I don't have it right here. So then Khedrup J replies, those who advocate these positions are making themselves known to be utter fools. This is kind of famous rhetoric of Khedrup J, sort of really, saying other people are idiots. Those who advocate these positions are making themselves known to be utter fools, to be the likes of the Nigrantas. The Nigrantas were whom? Do you know, Mikhail?
No, sorry, I didn't get your question.
So on page 334, at the very last paragraph, it says, those who advocate these positions are making themselves known to be utter fools, to be the likes of the Nigrantas, to be like Nigrantas. Do you know who the Nigrantas were?
No, not sure. An ancient Indian school?
Who are they, Paul?
The Jains, if I remember correctly.
Mainly the Jains or Jains, yeah. Naked meditators. The entity that possesses the characteristic of wetness and fluidity, Lenshing Sherwa, appears to be pus and blood to the eye consciousness of a preta. See, so the dependent arising, Lama Tsongkhapa's view, and as explained here in Kedrup J, if you read further, I'll sort of summarize it first of all, is saying that the dependent arising that is shared by all sentient beings, according to their karma, let's say that which has the characteristic of being Lenshing Shewa. What did we say?
Wet and moistening.
Wet and moistening. Remember when we talked about fire is that which is hot and burning and so forth and so on. Each of the elements has its own definition. According to their karma, they only perceive a portion of that dependent arising. They don't perceive all of it, and the portion that they perceive is perceived by them as being pus and blood. So let's read that. The entity that possesses the characteristics of wetness and fluidity appears to be pus and blood to the eye consciousness of a preta. It appears to be water to the eye consciousness of a human and nectar to the eye consciousness of a god. At that time, do you accept those eye consciousnesses to be valid cognitions, or do you accept that some among the three are valid cognitions, whereas others are not? So when the preta sees pus and blood, and the god sees nectar, and the human sees water, or the fish sees an abode, are some of those perceptions valid cognitions? Are any of them valid cognitions? Maybe only the humans valid cognition, the others are wrong? Well, what is it? In the first case, it would follow that there was something that was pus and blood, clear water, and nectar all at the same time, if all of them are valid cognitions. That's what, at first glance it would seem. Whereas there exists a valid cognition that is unmistaken about these three being mutually exclusive. Because that single entity would be established as being pus and blood by a valid cognition, say of a preta, and not being pus and blood by a valid cognition, let's say of a human, valid cognitions could no longer serve the slightest function as agents of verification. To prove the validity of something, you need to have it perceived by a valid cognition. So if those valid cognitions are contradictory to one another, you couldn't use valid cognitions to prove the validity. Where am I? To accept this and to claim that only that is true which appears to one's own mind, and say as a human, and that it is not therefore possible to decisively posit something to be X or not X, reduces one to being unable to decisively distinguish between the correct philosophical position of the Buddhists and the incorrect position of the heterodox non-Buddhists. I think that's what he translates what Jeffrey translates the Forders, non-Buddhists. Therefore, because the teachers of the heterodox and our own teacher, the perfect Buddha, would not be distinguished in goodness, what worse karma is there than this? The slandering, the deprecation, kuradapa, of the three jewels. So let's go a little bit further down to the end of that page that's highlighted in green. Now, if you were wondering what we ourselves accept, what the Prasangika accepts, it is this. We believe that the eye consciousnesses of all three beings, gods, humans, and pretas, are valid cognitions. That would seem to be contradictory, right? Because the Preta sees pus and blood, the God sees nectar and so forth. Nonetheless, we do not believe that the vessel filled with wet and fluid substance is the common basis for all three substances. Clean and cool water, pus and blood, and nectar. Those are the three substances. We do not believe that the vessel filled with wet and fluid substance is the common basis. Instead, we believe that one part is pus and blood, that one part is clean, cool water, and that one part arises as nectar. It is not the case, however, that as soon as the vessel filled with the wet and fluid substance comes into existence, these three parts also come into existence. It is not that for as long as the continuity of the vessel filled with wet and fluid substance exists, so long does it engage in possessing the continuity of the three parts. Instead, it is when the Preta comes close to it that the previous moment of the wet and fluid substance acting as a material cause, the substantial cause, and the Preta's own karma acting as the dominant cause, the dakyan, make one part of that vessel filled with wet and fluid substance arise as pus and blood. Likewise, when a god approaches it, the previous moment of the wet and fluid substance acting as the material cause, together with the god's own karma, which acts as the dominant causes one portion to arise as nectar. When the god and Preta leave it, however, because the karmic dominant cause is not complete, the latter continuities of pus and blood and nectar do not arise. It is by virtue of the Preta's evil karma, bad karma, that he or she sees the pus and blood part, and it is because he has not accumulated good karma that he does not see the nectar part. By virtue of his good karma, the god sees the part of the nectar, and does not see the part of the pus and blood. Therefore, when the Preta takes that vessel in his hand and begins to drink from it, pus and blood, all of the parts become exclusively pus and blood as soon as it reaches the Preta's mouth. This is because it becomes an object used exclusively by a Preta. The other two cases should be understood in the same way by analogy. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there for you to read, and we'll go over that in detail on Monday. So let's just read back now in Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary. How are we doing? Yeah. So after the quotation from Asbhava's commentary to the Mahayana Samgraha that we talked about, or Nisvabhava, Lama Tsongkhapa writes, according to Jimpa's translation, here one might raise the following question. The perceptions of these sentient beings are valid conventional cognitions, aren't they? Yet, if contradictory perceptions of a single thing can all exist as valid cognitions, these three different, if they're all valid cognitions, if they're all contradictory, then what is made of pus and blood would be mutually exclusive with what is made of pus and blood would not be mutually exclusive with what is not of pus and blood. There would be no reliability at all to what is established by valid cognition. Does that make sense, Ollie? So Venerable Jones says on page 188, objection. The seer of migrating beings who thinks it is that is a valid cognition of conventions, That's a general statement. So the visual consciousness of sentient beings who perceives, makes a statement like that, it is that. That's a valid conventional cognition, right? Yet if a single base, say this wet and moistening substance, if a single base is established by valid cognizer to be dissimilar things, then the two, being pus and blood, and that's one, and being pus and not being pus and blood, would not be contradictory, even that established by valid cognizer would not be reliable. Okay. Making sense what he's saying? Nadine, making sense? No.
I try to understand, but I don't really understand by now. Maybe later.
Yeah, so it's saying supposedly all of these sentient beings have valid conventional cognizers. So generally what is pus and blood is not water, not cool, clean water, and is not nectar. And what is cool, clean water is not nectar, is not pus and blood, and so forth. So if a single base that they're all perceiving, supposedly, is established by a valid cognizer to be dissimilar things, pus and blood or water or so forth, then being pus and blood and not being pus and blood would not be contradictory. Are pus and blood and not pus and blood contradictory? They would be contradictory in general, right? But they would, if they were, would not be contradictory, and even that established by a valid cognizer would not be reliable. Okay, so you have to think about that a little bit. Then the way that Venerable Joan has written it here, so response. In Thupten Jinpa's translation, he says, reply. If the question raised is, quote, understanding the meaning of the scriptures in this way, then valid cognizers would in fact become unreliable. Since that is unsuitable, that, valid cognizers can't be unreliable, since that's unsuitable, how should one then understand the meaning of the text? That's the end of the quotation. That is, the questioning of the intelligent. That's what an intelligent person would question. How are you to understand this? If, on the other hand, one considers such understanding to be the meaning of the scriptures and says, quote, valid cognizers cannot be established with any reliability, this would be completely unacceptable. We have to accept valid cognizers. Such a person will never be able to posit a single thing and say, I know this, and will be thus deprecating all valid cognizers. So Thupten Jinpa's translation of that reply is this. Now, if the question raised is this, to understand the meaning of the text in the above terms would clearly render valid cognitions to be unreliable, right? If they were all valid cognitions and they saw different things, that would seem to be make them unreliable. Since this is unacceptable, how should one understand the meaning of the text? If this is indeed the question, it is that of a discerning mind. What did Venerable Joan said something, the question of the intelligent. If, on the other hand, one takes the above understanding to be the actual meaning of the text, and one goes on to assert that valid cognitions cannot be established with any reliability, this would be utterly unacceptable. Such a person will not be able to posit a single thing and make a statement such as, I know this, quote unquote. He or she will be thus denigrating all instances of valid cognition. Then continuing, how then should we understand the text? one might ask. So yeah, how are we going to figure this out? And this seems like conundrum, right? So K-J already gave some explanation. So it's at this point that his explanation is relevant. So now we'll read originally what Lama Tsongkhapa mentioned. So at the beginning of Jose's explanation in that PDF, I think it was note 1044 or something like that. That note referred to this section of Madhyamakavatara. So then how should we understand the text, one might ask? To explain this, let me start with an analogy. Say a person who has mastered the mantra spell for not being burned when touching a burning red metal ball picks up such a metal ball with his bare hands. Have you heard of this spell? Paul, have you heard of that?
Not specifically, but it makes me think of the sort of running on hot coals analogy.
Right, with their which can be, and when you go to vacation in Malaysia or something, the people run over hot coals. It's something different, but there are some ability to transform that which is hot and burning with mantra and so forth, to be able to hold it and so forth. So say a person who has mastered the mantra spell for not being burned when touching a burning red metal ball picks up such a metal ball with his bare hands. And I'm going to leave the male here because I don't want women picking up that hot metal ball. Okay. So when he does so, his tactile sense does perceive the texture of the metal ball, the tactile sensation of that ball, but the texture is not experienced as extremely hot and burning. Generally, how does one experience, as a human being, let's say as a human, how do we experience hot and cold? Do you know? Suvansh, do you know?
Hot and cold is are one of the elements.
Yeah, so is that experienced by the eye consciousness, the ear consciousness, the nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness? By?
Tactile.
Tactile consciousness, right? It's one of, so you, with the tactile consciousness, you can experience smooth and rough and different kinds of textures like that, and also hot and cold. So that's what's being talked about here. That texture or that tactility is not experienced as extremely hot and burning. This is because his hand has been washed with water, enchanted or blessed or affected by mantra spells and other such conditions. So there's some kind of thing like this. To those who do not possess the mantra spells, the texture of that metal ball, the tactile nature of that metal ball will be extremely hot and burning. Now, both the burning and the non-burning textures will have to be accepted as textures or tactile sensations of that single metal ball. It is also not the case that what is perceived by one type of tactile sensation is being affirmed by the other as well. They're actually contradictory, right? One perceives it as hot and burning, one doesn't perceive it as hot and burning. So even though both sensations are accepted as valid, it is not that what is perceived by one is negated by the other. Does that make sense? Venerable Jones says, due to this both being asserted to be valid cognizers, that established by one is not negated by the other. They're both valid. Tumtin Chippa continues, likewise, one dimension of that stream, we're talking about the Preda now, because this was an analogy, one dimension of that stream at the site where the river flows exist as pus and blood to the hungry ghost, owing to the power of their karma, while the stream arises for humans owing to their karma, not as pus and blood, but as water for drinking or washing. Now, both the pus and blood, as well as the water, are dimensions of one and the same stream. When he says dimensions of, let me see, do I have the Tibetan there? I don't have the Tibetan.
Jimpa said one and the same sensation.
I'm talking about the word dimensions, one and the same. Now, both the pus and blood, as well as the water, are dimensions of one and the same stream. At the same time, the facts affirmed by the perceptions of hungry ghosts and human beings are two distinct things. It is also not the case that what is established by one is somehow being affirmed by the other as something wholly different. Okay. So again, we'll need to go over this again next time on the discussion on Monday. But now a quotation from the friendly letter. What's the friendly letter? Do you know? Does anyone know? What text is that? Karen doesn't know because she's.
So Nagarjuna's letter to a friend is the other way it's translated, I think.
Is that the same as the Ratnavali?
That's the precious Ratnavali would be the precious garland. Now this is the Suherlika.
Right. So the Tinyik.
Right.
So this is another letter that Nagarjuna wrote. So Nagarjuna wrote the letter to a king called the Ratnavali, or the Rinchen Tengwa precious garland, to one king that he had some karmic connection with. This is another letter he wrote to another king, and a very famous text, just called Friendly Letter. So there it says, for hungry ghosts, the moon is hot in fall, and in winter, even the sun is cold. So I have some argument with Chimpa's translation there. The Tibetan says, Yidak namla, so to pretas, Yidak means pretas, to them or for them, soke dusuni, dawa ang sawala, guni nima angdang. Anyway, the Tibetan says, essentially, when what Chimpa translates as fall, where he says the moon is hot in fall, that's in the Tibetan that's saying soke du. What does soke do? Do you know, Paul? So that's a synonym of what it means is like when we talk about sojong, the same so regeneration. It's the season of regeneration. So that's generally associated with spring or early summer, sometime in that region, not fall. And so it's saying that in the, let's say in the in the spring, let's say, the moon is hot for pretas. So what does that mean? Generally, what do we say about the experience of moonlight in ancient India? Anyone know?
Refreshing.
Refreshing. Supposed to be. So some people explain that to mean that if you see the full moon in the springtime, oh, that's your cat, Don. I was wondering what that was. We see the full moon in springtime and a cloudless night. Generally, it feels cool at that time from the fact that the sun has set. So that's what's being meant here. But for pretas, at a time when other people, humans, might experience the moonlight as refreshing and cool, they experience it as hot, just the opposite of what we experience. And in the winter, when the sunlight that might be appreciated by us as being warming, for them the sun is cold. So in that regard, I'd like to just read this section from the Friendly Debtor. There's not many translations available. This is one translation by Alex Berzin, and you can find it in his studybuddhism.com section. So before I do, Richard, you have a question or?
I'm really confused about this word dimension that, is this a dimension that only pretas can see and humans can't? And is it the case that the dimension is such that humans can see a certain dimension that pretas can't? And if this is the case, I'm not sure what a dimension is. I don't understand what it's supposed to be.
I think it's a bad translation, Richard. I think it's a bad translation. It's just chache in Tibetan.
Venerable Jones says, when one part of the river. So he says one dimension of the river.
So is this a part then that is simply unavailable to humans, period? Like we couldn't find a way to measure it in any way with any instrument? I'm not sure I understand what it is.
So when we have the remember when we talk about emptiness in general, we say that there is no inherent appearance of anything. To a Buddha's mind, when the Buddha's perceiving, let's say, this situation of a body of water, flowing river or something like that, that humans perceive as clean and clear, and gods perceive as nectar, so forth and so on, pretas perceive as pus and blood. The Buddha, to her consciousness, to their omniscient mind, it doesn't have any particular appearance. There's no inherently existent appearance. The appearance of something depends upon one's own karma and the dependent arising, let's say, the dependent arising of the forest and the trees and all the things that the elephants or the deers around there, all those are in that dependent arising. They're perceived by different beings in different ways, but particularly the water part of it, one part of that is perceived by the pretas as pus and blood. So this is going back. We'll go over this on Monday again in the discussion group. One part of that, depending upon as a basis, and the karma of the preta, they perceive that part of the dependent arising due to their karma as pus and blood. So that's not the part that the humans are perceiving. Yeah, Nadine.
But it is also said that Mount Meru is perceived by one as being round and by others as being square, but you cannot explain it if you come with some part of Mount Meru. What about, I don't understand this when you talk about a part of it.
We're not talking a part of Mount Meru. We're talking a part of the dependent arising.
Ah, okay. Yes, thank you.
It's not like what, one part over there. So let me read for you this section about hungry ghosts from Alex Berzin's, and I will put in the chat here.
Venerable George, do you know which verse you are referring to in Berzin or in that book?
I'm going to read them in a second, Suvash. And if you want to read his whole translation of the Friendly Letter, I just posted in the chat a link to Alex Berzin's website.
So I'm assuming this is a letter to a friend.
Yes.
And it has been translated by, there's a commentary on it by Geshe Sopa.
No, was it? There not a published translation.
Yeah, there is. Nagarjuna's Advice for Buddhists. Geshe Sopa's explanation of Letter to a Friend.
Oh, really? What that is published by what? By Wisdom Publications?
Yeah, do you know Beth? She translated it.
Beth Newman. Okay. Okay, thank you for that. If you could post that, but I'm going to read right now uh, from Alex Berzin's translation about the Yidaks. So that means the pretas. Okay, so this is the verse we're concerned with is verse 95 of the first two lines, but this is going to start with verse 91. Clutching ghosts. So Alex Berzin has his own way of translating these things. Clutching ghosts. This is verse 91. So this is his translation of preta. We usually say hungry ghosts. How do you think he got clutching ghosts? Rachel, do you have any idea? So the karma to become a preta is due to their usually
attachment. Yeah. They're grasping at things. They're clutching at things.
Yeah. So that's how he translates preta. Clutching ghosts also have an unbroken stream of sufferings, which flow from their being starved of what they long for. I guess that's a nice way of translating it. They must entrust themselves to the extremely unbearable state that builds up from being hungry ghosts, from being hungry, thirsty, cold, hot, and scared. So these are the sufferings of the hungry ghosts. Then verse 92. Some with bellies huge as the size of a mountain, connected to mouths the mere eye of a needle. So their tummies are very enormous, but their mouths are like the size of the eye of a needle. Where was I? Connected to mouths the mere size of a needle, are tortured by hunger, not having the capacity to eat, and even the thirst, even the tiniest lump of filth thrown away. So they don't have the capacity, even if something is like some spit or phlegm on the ground or dirt or excrement on the ground, they can't even put that in their mouth. 93. Some with bodies just like skin and bone are naked, and like the withered treetops of Palmyra palm trees, while some blaze flames from their mouths in the sphere of the night, having to eat blazing sand as their food poured into their mouths. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche was quite renowned, especially when we were at Deer Park, when Lama Zopa would come to listen to Geshe Zopa's teachings. Lama Zopa often would be making water offerings to the pretas. So it's possible that even though the pretas just left with ordinary water, they can't approach it, they can't get it into their mouths, turn it into fire and everything to them. If it's blessed with certain mantras that Guru Shakyamuni taught. In fact, we did it at Tupta Norbu Ling, didn't we, Rachel? The Preta Puja you helped to lead, remember? You've forgotten. Okay. Doesn't matter. So that's what's Lama Zopa would make offerings of water to them, blessed in that way, so that they could actually enjoy it. And it's said that Lama Zopa Rinpoche could actually perceive the fire of their bodies, of their legs running together at night, that other people without that psychic power could not see. So that was verse 93. 94. Several lower classes cannot find even filth, such as pus or excrement or blood or the like. They beat each other in the face and gobble down the oozing pus that drips out from their goiters on their necks. These are famous verses from the letter to a friend. So this is the verse in question, 95. For them, in summertime, even the moon seems hot. And in the winter, even the sun seems cold. Trees seem to become barren of fruit by their merely having glanced at them, and rivers seem to become dried up. So if they see an orchard where there's actually fruit, for them, it looks like that they're bare, the trees, the limbs are bare and so forth. And then two final verses. Some having bodies tightly bound by the grappling rope of the karma of their faulty deeds that have made them entrust themselves to sufferings, unbroken, never come to die for 5,000 or 10,000 years. So they have to experience these sufferings for many, many years. Then finally, 97, whatever various sufferings there are, all of one taste, that the clutching ghosts have received like those, the cause for them is delighting in stinginess as a human. That's one of the main causes of becoming a preta, a hungry ghost, stinginess, miserliness. And the Buddha has said that misers are ignoble. So you can see his whole translation if you go to that link that I posted in the chat, and Suvansh is going to post the name of that text or some place where we can find Geshe Zopa's commentary on that. So I didn't know that. Thank you for that.
It was just published, I think, 2 years ago from Wisdom Publications.
Oh, okay. So that would be a commentary. Yeah, it's hard to find translations of that text. Okay, so that was similarly in the friendly letter. It states, for hungry ghosts, the moon is hot in summer, should be, and in winter, even the sun is cold. So due to the power of their past karma, hungry ghosts experience the light of the moon in summer as extremely hot, while in the winter, even the temperature of the sun manifests as freezing for those hungry ghosts. Yet there is no contradiction in human beings experiencing sensations of coolness and heat in relation, respectively, to the rays of the moon and the sun. It is also not the case that one and the same sensation perceived as cold by one instance of valid cognition is perceived by heat by another instance of valid cognition. However, since both of these temperatures reflect the sensory experience of one and the same sun or moon, the expression one thing is used. So, without finally analyzing the intended meaning of the text, do not become complacent with a premature conclusion when some rough understanding happens to arise in you. Okay, good warning. Okay, so we're going to begin next time, our last class before Christmas, with this next section, a summary that concludes the refutation. And hopefully we will get to that and start the next section, refuting the proof of intrinsic existence of dependent nature next time. So before we dedicate, what do you think? Made some sense today? Still confusing? Still something to go back in? Yeah, Miguel.
The important thing is that you cannot say that the same base is understood differently by valid cognitions.
Yeah, that's
you have to say that there are different parts.
That's what I understand from Kedrup J's explanation and from Lama Tsong Khapa's explanation here. So it's not like, as Nadine was asking, like if Mount Meru is perceived in different ways, as is mentioned in the Kala Chakra Tantra, and Lama Yeshe used to say that in the Abhidharma, it says that Mount Meru has, what kind of shape is Mount Meru supposedly in the Abhidharma?
Square?
Kind
Square?
of, yeah, sort of like sort of like trapezoidal or something like that. And some perceive it as in different ways and so forth. There's no contradiction. So they're perceiving the same dependent arising. So if you think of the Buddhist perspective, just the dependent arising that is occurring at any one moment is perceived by the sentient beings in that location. That doesn't have inherently any particular kind of appearance. The way it appears to sentient beings is dependent upon their karma. And then in addition to that, say when we talk about the difference between a preta and a human and a god and so forth, their perception of that dependent arising is mitigated by their own karma, but also what part of that, there are different parts of it, of that dependent arising that they're actually perceiving. So that's made clear in Jose's or translation of K-Drup-J.
Venerable
So-
George.
Yes.
I was just going to say, although if you read the next page of K-Drup, he then goes on to say that, like, if the substance comes out of the spring in the ground, then yeah, it's water, right? I think that's what he says on the next page. If he says something like, where is it? He says blah 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 blah. What was it before? And he says something like, yeah. So the third full paragraph on 336. If it were a river, a spring, or a well that came from the earth, it were taken for any of those, then it would be originally ordinarily water, as it arose from a karmic domain in which humans are dominant.
Which page is that?
336 of second paragraph from the bottom.
Okay. So we can go over this a little bit on Monday. I know not all of you have time to attend on Monday, but we can try to clear that. But we'll also review this next time. What do you think, Nadine?
Oh, thank you, Venerable George. What we learned today, that part of dependent arising, that sounds like the Svatantrika 50-50. That there is some part from the side of the object and some part from the side of, like this 50-50 thing of the Svatantrika Madhyamika. When we heard it as part of dependent arising, which contributes to the perception of this or that, or it sounds like this 50-50 thing.
I'm not sure that's the same thing. I'm not sure what you're thinking of when we talk about Svatantrika. For Svatantrika, I don't think that's talking about exactly the same thing. Here, what it's mentioning is that the dependent arising itself, which the Buddha perceives, and the Buddha knows how all sentient, the Buddha knows how pretas perceive that dependent arising, how gods perceive it, how humans perceive it. And via that knowledge, the Buddha can perceive water or pus and blood or nectar and so forth. The important point here is that the pretas are only perceiving a portion of the dependent arising. They're not perceiving the portion of the dependent arising that appears to humans as water, because then their valid cognitions would be contradictory. If they're perceiving the same basis, the same part, as different things, and they're both valid cognitions, then valid cognitions would not be reliable.
Thank you so much. Luckily, we can talk more on Monday. Luckily.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. Okay. So before we end, any final questions? Okay. So yeah, let's try to dedicate the virtues that we've created. Hopefully we've created some. Due to these virtues, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha, and as a result lead all living beings, all migrators without exception, into that very same state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more as a result of these virtues. And then long life, or the prayer for the quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang Drakpa, father and sons, together with your lineages, all the objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow here and now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience, that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, while striving exclusively for the welfare of the conqueror's teachings and for the welfare of mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. You passed away. At this I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the three jewels and the great waves of bodhicitta of the bodhisattvas, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And finally, for all of our gurus, the Dalai Lamas, the Yangtze Rinpoches, the Khyentse Rinpoches, and so forth, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means moved by mercy, illuminating spiritual friends, I make this request, and the request by implication is please live long and stable lives. Okay, thank you. Well, yeah, so this question about how the Pretas perceive and so forth is a very famous debate, and yeah, it has a lot of different facets and complications. So we can clear that up on Monday and in the next class and continue on. Take care. Hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Try to keep
Thank
your
you,
mind.
Venerable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, practice the mind training. Take care.